So what's good, TMG fam? It's your boy Ellen. I'm back with another reaction. How y'all feel? Welcome back to the channel. Salute, man. And next up on the blacklist, shout outs to Nexpo. Haven't been over here in a minute to check him out. You know he always dropping some heat. And this video here is the vanishing of David Lewis. Guy disappeared from Texas. And I think the description said in 93. So we're going to get into this story, man, and try to figure out what happened and go through the story. If you're new to the channel, man, hit the subscribe button. Join the family, man. And salute to all the other fam members, man. Love y'all. Let's go. I ain't heard this music in a while. Bring it back from the top.
On January 31st, 1993, the wife and daughter of a Texas man named David Lewis would return home to discover him nowhere to be found. Soon after and across the country, an unidentified man would be spotted walking down the side of a highway before being killed in a hit and run. It would take over 11 years for these stories to converge. The disappearance.
What was that timeline again? Hold on.
Found. Soon after and across the country, an unidentified man would be spotted walking down the side of a highway before being killed in a hit and run. It would take over 11 years for these stories to converge.
Wow.
The disappearance, as you might expect, was sudden and abnormal, but shine light into the possibility that David Glenn Lewis just might have been hiding something.
The fans are going wild, and the show is about to begin. Welcome, everybody, to Bud Bowl 5.
Whoa, man, this place is rocking!
It was 1993. Super Bowl weekend, to be exact. With preparations in place in a lively Dallas, Texas, waiting an influx of sports fans, festivities were abundant for one of the largest sports events of the year. On the 28th of January, David's wife and daughter, Karen and Lauren, embarked on a 400-mile trip from their home in Amarillo to Dallas for a weekend of shopping in the city. The reason why David stayed behind is unclear. Some have stated that he wanted to record the game to a VHS, and since their VCR lacked a function to begin a recording at a set date, he had to be there in person to start it. Others, like his wife, have made tangential statements alluding to the possibility that he had to work, since he was a lawyer. From the span of January 28th to the 31st, what took place back at the Lewis home is unclear. By January 31st, though, Karen's testimony aided investigators in piecing together those missing events. That evening, the game was scheduled to begin at 5:30 p.m. Central. A few hours after this, around 11:15 p.m., Karen and Lauren would arrive back at the home to discover David nowhere to be found. His car was missing. There was clean laundry in the dryer. His wedding ring and watch were intact on the counter. There were 2 freshly made turkey sandwiches in the fridge. And the VCR had recorded even after the match was over.
Okay. So why would the wedding ring and watch be there? Now, I know most people would be like, well, maybe he was done with the marriage and everything, and he just left, and he left it. He would leave the ring, right? Why his watch? Why would he leave his watch, though? I don't know, just something I'm starting to gather thoughts, just taking y'all through my thought process.
Which is in the fridge. And the VCR had recorded even after the match was over. At first glance, the circumstances here wouldn't exactly raise red flags, since there appeared to be no evidence of foul play. And so Karen assumed that he'd merely been working late or watching the game somewhere, and would return soon. David Glenn Lewis never returned home again. 1 day later, his wife would officially report him missing. At around 10:30 p.m. on the night of February 1st, a motorist on State Route 24 in Yakima, Washington, encountered what they believed to be a man walking on the side of the road. Since it was so late, his actions were cause for concern, since it wasn't exactly common to find people hitchhiking in the dead of night. While it was hard to tell, they believed that the man was dressed in military-style clothing and work boots. Following this odd encounter, they found a safe spot to make a U-turn so they could loop back around and check up on him. When they finally managed to get back, they discovered his body, but it was lifeless on the side of the road. A Chevy Camaro was also allegedly spotted fleeing the scene when they approached him. However, attempts at catching the plate information were unsuccessful. After this discovery, they rushed to file a report, and police arrived on the scene shortly after. Investigations into the body found that there were no drugs or alcohol in his system, and there was unfortunately no form of identification, leaving him stuck as an unidentified John Doe. The Camaro that was spotted was one of the only working leads, and since the shoulders on State Route 24 weren't exactly pronounced, the hit and run that took place was eventually deemed accidental, leaving the case to remain stagnant. Conversely, back in Amarillo, the investigation into David Lewis was just ramping up. The very next day, his red Ford SUV was spotted outside of the Potter County Courts building, a mere 10 miles from the local airport. Inside the glove box, investigators were able to find his credit cards, driver's license, and checkbook in spots that Karen claims he usually keeps them. Soon after this discovery, Karen Lewis expressed even greater concern since it was incredibly out of the ordinary for him to just up and vanish without any of his possessions or identification. It began to seem that there was a piece to the puzzle that investigators were missing. Something that had potentially placed David in the crosshairs of an adversary.
Really?
In one of her testimonies, Karen claimed that a few weeks prior to his disappearance, her husband told her that he believed that he was in danger, but wouldn't provide any information as to what the immediate threat was. This eventually led David's family to express the belief that it could have been linked to his work as an attorney. He had allegedly been wrapped up in a high-stakes lawsuit against his former law firm, him, Irwin, Graham, and Cox, with the wealthy client suing them for conflict of interest. A week after he went missing, David was scheduled to fly to Dallas for a deposition, determined to reveal the firm's misdeeds no matter the cost. It was noted by his father that shortly before he vanished, he claimed that he was, quote, going to tell the truth, whoever it hurts.
Whoa. See, that's the thing, bro. That's the thing, man. You want to do the right thing, but you know who you work for, and people out here will stop at nothing to stop you from exposing them. They will stop at nothing, bro. So he's testifying in a high-stakes lawsuit against his former law firm. Let's read this part. It says, a wealthy client was suing the firm for an alleged conflict of interest. Although David no longer worked at Ham and Irwin, he was scheduled to fly to Dallas for a deposition. According to Amarillo, David stated he had no intention of minimizing the firm's wrongdoing. So he was pretty much trying to take them down. And you know how it is. It's like the thread on a shirt. Once you pull that one thread and it starts pulling and unraveling, you may pull that whole shirt apart. Everything may come apart. So if they were doing something there, he may expose way more. And I'm guessing that they didn't want that to happen. So I'm pretty sure. So far, I'm the first people I'm looking at is that law firm.
These leads, unfortunately, also materialize nothing.
Damn.
few months later, a discovery was made involving David Lewis and plane tickets that he'd purchased the weekend he went missing. 2 of them. One from Dallas to Amarillo, Texas, purchased on January 31st, and a second from Los Angeles to Dallas, purchased on the 1st of February. This effectively places Lewis at the DFW airport on the 31st and at LAX the very next day. It's widely believed that he had pre-purchased his return flights while at each location, although the actual flight dates and if he used the tickets are unclear. This leaves us with 3 lingering questions though. Where was David Lewis going? How did he get to where he was without any sort of trail? And why did he purchase return tickets back home? To answer the second question, we have to consider the time period that his flights were purchased. Since it predates the 9/11 tragedy, airline rules in the US were much more lax than they are today. Back then, one could purchase a ticket using a completely different name since a valid ID wasn't required to board the flight. Of course, this is far from how things are today, so this doesn't work anymore, but most are set on the belief that this is what Lewis had done on his flights out of town. Regarding the why, well, that's still unclear. Some have postulated that he was trying to get away from that aforementioned threat, covering up his tracks along the way. It's believed that, for him, it wasn't as imperative to fly under the radar, so to speak, while returning home. But
Okay, but I'm still puzzled about, because I get that, the threat, you want to cover it up, you're trying to move incognito. You know, the threat has been there, so you don't want nobody knowing how you're going to move to get to the point to take care of what you're going to take care of, bringing them down. So why roll out the house, leave your wedding ring and your watch? Was it a sudden leave? And all of a sudden somebody said, get here now, and you just bolted out the house? And I'm still, it's still confusing.
that is, if he ever planned to. By June of that year, leads remained sparse as circumstantial details trickled in. It seemed like piecing together what and where David Lewis did and went was paramount to harvesting any sort of answer on his current whereabouts and motivations. A Del Rio, Texas news publisher by the name of the Del Rio News Herald published an allocated timeline up to that point in the investigation, and while it doesn't exactly provide any definitives, it does exemplify the fact that Lewis's weekend was far from ordinary. According to the write-up, starting on Thursday, January 28th, Lewis had left his workplace at noon, claiming he was sick. The next day, a friend spotted him rushing through the Southwest Airlines terminal at the local airport with no luggage. On Saturday, $5,000 was deposited into Lewis's bank account, with a neighbor spotting his red SUV at home. By Sunday morning, he was spotted at the court building, taking a photo of his car in the parking lot. And by Monday morning, a Dallas cab driver drove a man matching the description of Lewis from a hotel to the Dallas airport. The driver claims that, quote, the passenger seemed nervous and fumbled through a wad of $100 bills to pay the fare. Now, if we assume that all of these claims are accurate, then they hint at the possibility of Lewis paying for his plane tickets with cash to further avoid being tracked. Considering the fact that he left all of his personal possessions, including his credit card and ID at home, this, of course, makes sense. What stands out here, however, is the $5,000 that was placed into his account. Unless he was allocating a substantial chunk of that for some other obligation, I don't think a few taxi rides and plane trips would come anywhere close to reaching that monetary milestone. The only explanation that could account for a sum of this magnitude would be some sort of direct deposit from his employer being wired into his account. Considering the fact that he was a longtime lawyer, it wouldn't be far-fetched to assume that this would be the reason. But if that were the case, why would it, at all, be notable? If this were his typical pay, then it would be simple to discount it as just that. Work compensation. Just food for thought.
And then another thought is, who would take out a lawyer, right? For somebody to take out a lawyer, you've got to be, like, you just not no regular Joe Blow. You know what I mean? Regular Joe Blow ain't taking out no lawyer. They know what type of heat's going to come with that. They know it's going to be, you know what I mean? Somebody with precision, somebody of stature, somebody who's high up in some type of a powerful organization or something, and just no regular, basically what I'm saying, there's just no regular Joe Blow is gonna take out a lawyer. You know what I mean? I see that as like somebody taking out a lawyer here. The next step would be a cop, somebody trying to take out a cop. You know what I mean? Those are just those are people that you just don't normally see people take out.
Jumping to his Dallas, Texas encounter on February 1st, I'd like to highlight something. If he were taking a taxi from a hotel to the Dallas airport, then we have to assume that he spent the night in Dallas after arriving there the previous day.
Right.
Thinking back on the chain of events, though, presents a unique inconsistency. Looking back, we can recall that Lewis allegedly wanted to record the Super Bowl,
right,
and there were freshly made sandwiches in the fridge. If David were to have been spotted that morning taking a picture of his vehicle at the court building, then his only method of getting back home would have been taking a taxi or getting someone to pick him up. For someone with so many extraordinary variables surrounding his disappearance, something as simple as wanting to record a football game is immensely unexceptional. The typical long play VHS tape records approximately 4 hours of footage, and the average football game is around 3 hours and 12 minutes long. If we're assuming that the VCR didn't have any sort of auto-record feature, then it makes the events surrounding this that much more puzzling. Why go through the effort of dropping your car off that morning only to make it back home, going about your day, and even making sandwiches like everything's alright? Why up and vanish after 5:30, leaving behind everything you have? This is, of course, assuming that the VCR did not have an auto-record function. Unfortunately, confirmation for and against this minute detail have never been released, and because of that, it's unclear whether he left that morning when he was spotted, or later that night. That sentiment largely encompassed the Lewis case investigators. It seemed that the pieces were falling in line, however substantial answers and leads to the body were mostly non-existent. Because of this, and after 11 months, the search unfortunately concluded, leaving this case to sit untouched until anything further came of it.
I can't lie, this one is racking my brain, bro. Hats off to investigators, bro, because this is what they deal with on a daily. You know what I mean? You gotta stare at a blank canvas and put stuff together. I feel like he was taken. You know what I'm saying? He was there. He might have been home. He was getting ready for the Super Bowl, and it seems like somebody staged it to look like he was setting himself up to go there. You know what I'm saying? And like they said at the airport pre 9/11 wasn't as strict as it is now. So they could have set things up and lined things up to make it look like he set everything up. I don't know. This is crazy. Straight up crazy. Here we go. Breakthrough.
It would take over 10 years before the events that took place in Yakima and Amarillo would converge. In 2004, a Washington state detective named Peter Ditter was reading a series by the name of Without a Trace. After becoming fascinated with the topic of missing persons, he embarked on a personal journey to identify any that he could. After looking into a few and their characteristics, he eventually stumbled upon coverage of the situation that played out that night in Washington. He cross-checked the photo from the crime scene with various contenders and realized that the person looked incredibly similar to David Glenn Lewis of Amarillo. The only catch was that Lewis was known to have worn glasses, while the unidentified body wasn't wearing any when he was found. Upon further investigation into the characteristics and items that were found on John Doe's body, however, a pair of glasses were among them, effectively sealing the deal that this man was, in fact, David Glenn Lewis. But of course, this discovery would only raise more questions than answers. What obligations would David Lewis have in Yakima, Washington, of all places? Why was he spotted in military-styled clothing and work boots, attire that Karens come forward to claim are extremely unusual for him? If he had all this cash, why couldn't he grab a rental car or a taxi? We can't claim that he had drugs or alcohol in his system since those tests came back negative. So why exactly was he spotted walking down the side of a Washington highway at 10:30 at night? Well, that's where everyone's stuck. Some had postulated that it could have been tied to the case he was working on against his former employer. And others,
Like, I'm ready to throw my whole thought process out again, fam, because now I'm thinking about him walking down the road. How does he even get to that? Bro, this is stumping me.
Some had postulated that it could have been tied to the case he was working on against his former employer. And others have settled on the possibility that it could have been linked to a mental breakdown. If you ask me, I believe it was tied to sudden paranoia, brought upon himself through that threat he alluded to with his wife. What that threat is, could be tied to his work, or could be something completely out of the picture. Considering the fact that he ended up in Yakima, Washington of all places, lends to the potential that he might have been more secretive than he made out to be. But that's the thing. That's merely speculation. Something that this investigation is no stranger to. And
Maybe it could have been like, you know what I mean? You know how people think when they go into protection mode. You know somebody's after you. You know a lot about the inner workings and details of a corrupt organization, or in this case, a law firm, right? You know this stuff. You might have participated in, so you know it that well. But you're vowing to take them down. Your family leaves out for that day, perfect time for you to throw your plan into action or to distance yourself away from the family so they don't get harmed. You know what I'm saying? You leave your stuff, you get out. You don't want to have on a wedding ring because why? That's going to allude to them that you have a family and you don't want them coming back to it. They might already know, but they don't know where they are. You want to get as far away from your family as possible. And you know what I'm saying? So I'm throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks, bro.
that's where we sit. The inconsistencies and questions surrounding his disappearance are some that have gone unanswered for decades, leaving investigators scratching their heads. Unfortunately, it just might stay that way, because the only person who truly knows what played out that bizarre weekend is David Glenn Lewis, who left his entire life behind, with hardly a lead to follow.
Yeah, that's unfortunately where I end at. I'm all over the place, as you can tell. I can't make heads or tails of it, bro. What could have possibly happened to David Lewis? But that last theory that I had, I don't know, man. Like I said, I could watch this video back and that can all change again. You can hear something different. You could think about something different. You know? It's crazy, man. But I'm assuming that he knew what he was going up against when he made it public that he was taking that law firm down. And I'm guessing they came after him. And he wanted to get away from his family so nothing happened to them, and probably lured them to that area to where, you know what I mean, things could ultimately happen for him. I don't know. What do y'all think? What do y'all think in this story? Were you familiar with this story? Were you aware? Have you heard things that may have not been included in this video? Let us know, man. Any updates in the case? Let us know. You know? Y'all get at me in the comment section, man. It's your boy L. Till the next one, I'm gone. Peace.